Law is joining. She's on vacation. Appreciate her time and attention this evening. The purpose of tonight, there was an agenda that was posted. The things are going to just timing wise, we're going to change them a little bit because Lauren, our town council, is on vacation. She's requested that we work with her first, so we're going to do that, and then we'll go through the rest of the agenda items. I want to first take a roll for our committee members. So Joe Calamati here. Brian,
I'm here.
Can you hear us, Brian?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Great. Larry
Here.
Jen
Here.
Bill here. Sue.
I'm back on.
Okay, thank you. Kelly
Here.
All right, for myself, Don Martinez. So we have a quorum this evening. For the folks that haven't been here in the past, we are, how we'll handle this for everyone, just to make it simple, is that we're going to basically go through the item that was on the agenda. There was some information and comments submitted to us by citizen Mr. Dan Ranieri that he sent to some of the committee members that we reviewed, and we asked our town council at the end of the meeting, our last meeting, to review and to provide analysis. We had asked town council if they could provide us the analysis 48 hours in advance. Unfortunately, due to vacations and other things that came up, they were unable to do so. However, Lauren is going to review the document, her analysis with us this evening. Certainly to the committee members, I'm not expecting any type of action to be taken, recognizing that, you know, a few hours before the meeting is not fair. And we can, you know, we can discuss it this evening, and we certainly will. We can ask questions. So what we'll do is we'll ask the committee members, we'll ask the questions first. And then if you have some additional questions that the committee members have not asked, we'll turn it over to the citizens to ask Lauren for commentary or clarification regarding this document. And she's going to go through it. And then what we'll do from there, after Lauren's done, she's free to leave. The Board of Health is here because there's a question regarding moving from 3 members to 5 members, and the chair, Vinny Fort, is here this evening, and he's going to talk with us. And we are not expected to go through the charter this evening because I've asked the KP Law to revise the last version so we can start from a clean version. We talked about this at our last meeting. They were unable to get that completed, so she's going to be working on that, and I will be sending it to the committee. Basically, we're going to clean up the document. So the document that we had at town meeting had, as an example, it had the paragraph. It was struck through completely, and then they added a whole new paragraph, when really the only change was adding a few lines to the end of a section. So I've asked her to go back and clean that up so it's an understandable fashion. She's going to do that, and we will present. Once we have that, we'll post it on the website, our website, and all the committee members will get a copy. And if anyone here in the town would like a copy of that draft, it is a draft. They're free to either download that or to request of our secretary for a copy, and we'll ensure that you get a copy. All right. So is the committee okay with that approach? And again, I want to apologize. I mean, I've been on vacation. I think we're all entitled to vacation, and Lauren was too. And there's no way we could expect this committee to act on anything. But it's an opportunity for Lauren to go through what she prepared for us. So Lauren, you with us? I see your hand is up. Do you have a question?
No, about the cursor.
No, that's just the cursor. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren first to take us through the document. And I apologize for you folks. I don't know if there's a way that we can share it. Kelly? No?
Because I'm not on Zoom on that.
Okay.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay. I can see you, but I can't see me. So I just wanted to make sure that
Okay.
that you could hear me.
Okay.
So thank you all for having me this evening. As the chair indicated, I didn't get the document reviewing the citizen input to you all till today. And I do apologize. And I also understand that you'll need additional time. I wasn't in any way suggesting you could make any kinds of decisions without, having some time to think about things. And I will get back the revised draft to you as soon as possible so that you will have that as well. I thought tonight I would talk a little bit about kind of what I explained at town meeting and to this committee previously. And essentially that's to say that any charter provision that differs from the general laws with regard to municipal governance is deemed consistent with the general laws. For that reason, almost all the decisions that are made with regard to amendments can be characterized as policy decisions. The citizen who submitted some ideas came to different conclusions about how to deal with those policy decisions. But the draft that the committee had prepared and that was available at town meeting is perfectly fine. It does not have any fatal flaws. It's legal, and in my opinion, would be approved by the Attorney General if the Attorney General was reviewing it, or by House or Senate Council. To that end, this discussion gives us an opportunity essentially to kind of talk about what the issues were that were raised by the citizen. And so I will go through the different issues. The first one that was highlighted was the periodic charter and bylaw review. And the resident had proposed that the periodic charter the periodic charter review be a group of 11 people instead of 9, with one less appointment for the FinCom and one for the clerk, with the 2 additional members being appointed by the moderator. In addition, the resident had suggested that there would be it would insert a provision requiring that the charter committee provide a report to the select board at least 15 days prior to the date of town meeting. In my opinion, both of these issues, the size of the Charter and Bylaw Review Committee and whether to require a report to be filed or not, are appropriate subject matters for a charter. I will note that when it comes to deadlines in the charter, I always recommend leaving some flexibility. There is often the situation where a charter might say a particular time or date for something to be filed, for example. And oftentimes when that's directed at the government, meaning at the town's officers and employees, it is viewed by a court as directory rather than mandatory. So to avoid confusion, that's something that the committee might want to address. There is a case that's directly on point, and it's called Young v. Town of Westport. It's from 1939, believe it or not. And it essentially said that a bylaw that said that the Finance Committee shall hold a public hearing did not impose a requirement that the Finance Committee hold a public hearing, and that the town meeting that was held after that was completely valid, even though the Finance Committee hadn't held that public hearing. So in my view, this is kind of the same thing, whether it says 15 days or 10 days or 20 days. In my opinion, it would be directory rather than mandatory as it's written right now. Mr. Chair, do you want me to keep going, or do you want to do questions?
No, that's great pause, Lauren. I just want to ask the members of the committee if there's any questions or require clarification before we move on. Okay. We're good. We understand. We're good. Okay. Okay, Lauren. Thank you. We're good.
Thank you. I think I say this several times throughout the memorandum that these decisions can be made in any number of variations. It's not to say that there's one right way and one wrong way. There's a huge amount of breadth in terms of what the town can do using using the charter. So another question that was raised in the correspondence was the proposed deletion of section 2-3-1 of the current charter. In the committee's proposal, this section had been deleted, and immediately following, inserted instead was the section applicable to the form of an appointing authority for the finance committee. And I believe we had discussed this sometime back that, in my opinion, town meeting has the ability to create whatever legislative committees it wants. It can do it by vote of the town meeting. It could do it by bylaw. And there's nothing that would prevent the committee from prevent town meeting from creating appropriate committees, whether standing or just, kind of temporal with a shorter duration. And as such, that language, it's just not required, in my opinion. Again, it can be in there. It's not required to be in there, however, in order to give town meeting the authority to do those things. And one of the goals of the committee, as I understood, is to kind of keep things in the charter that are important, and if we're able to reduce some of the verbiage, that's not a bad thing. Mr. Chair, are there any questions?
Any questions, on that? No, and I think part of our objective as a committee to review the charter was, going back to what Lauren said, was to eliminate language that is no longer required, to get the charter in line with more general law, and a lot of those changes that you see, and also to kind of write the charter based upon the current culture that we live in. So as many of you know, what we did is we went through and we removed any references to gender. We replaced select men with select board. There are a number of those items that we did throughout the charter to make it current with today's cultural requirements. And a little further conversation with town council basically indicated that if we had submitted the without the gender being replaced, it's likely it would have been submitted to the Attorney General's office. It's likely it would have been pushed back to us because we have to do that today regarding the way it is. So, Lauren, continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think it's actually, I should have mentioned that there's a number of what look like minor revisions, such as gender or the tense surrounding the reference, but they're important decisions because the kind of mood at the legislature, as far as I'm aware, is that when they're looking at charter changes, they're looking to see whether the community has made references gender neutral. So I do think that's an important thing to do. Okay, so the next matter that was in the citizens' correspondence was about the dates of the annual town election and annual town meeting. And it appears that there was a suggestion that it might be better, and I'm just putting it in quotes because I'm kind of explaining where that citizen came from, to have the town meeting held before the town election rather than after it. And that is a sequencing issue that the charter can address. It is, there's pluses and minuses to both approaches. The pluses are, the persons who kind of put together the agenda for town meeting, and voted on it and participated in the crafting of motions are all still involved at the time of town meeting. And then the election follows that. But that does mean that anybody who's elected, let's say to moderator, they might not have anything to do until much later in the year. They may have wanted to be involved sooner so that they could influence some of the decisions that are made at town meeting. The charter can be revised. If it is, there will need to be a provision that addresses what happens to the terms of the people currently in office if these dates are changed. And that's something certainly that we could assist with drafting so that it can integrate seamlessly for the town. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that your charter right now does reference the dates, does reference the annual town election and the annual town meeting, but it defers the dates to the bylaws. And in my opinion, that's a reasonable way to manage this, because that way town meeting can change things by bylaw instead of having to do a charter amendment each time it wants to address the date of town meeting, for example.
Which is what we did, and we voted on in the November town meeting, so that has been changed in the bylaw to reflect that. It makes
Excellent.
sense to leave it that way, so we did that. Mr. O'Connell, do you have a question?
I'm fine, I'll make it back there in a second.
Okay. All right, Lauren, continue.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
I do have a question. So
Okay.
right now, our elections next year are when?
Right now, they're
June 4th.
I'll defer to the town clerk, Larry.
Our next local election will be June 4th.
The town meeting will be when?
I believe it's May 15th, something like that.
And the budget, state budget is that one reason why we extended things out?
No.
Okay, I
That's
thought,
why it comes to June as opposed to flip-flopping them, so the numbers will be available by the third week in May, which that's how it's always is.
okay,
So if we would have changed it so that the election was in the first week in May, then with the free cash might not have been available.
all right, so that's what you
So that's
call
why it went
it.
into June.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Can I make another comment too? So the other thing we realized with town meeting is that if you have the election in the beginning of May, some people who work hard on the budget might not be represented at town meeting. So this way, everyone who takes part in working on the budget and working towards May town meeting is there to present at town meeting. And then you have the election, which would essentially turn over any boards that are,
Or in essence,
elected.
any other committee moving forward. If there were changes in that committee, the election, they would still have to say what was going on.
Yeah, well, it happened this year, right?
Yep.
So, again, no difference to the select board, but, Mr. Hennessy wasn't involved in the entire process.
Mhm.
He becomes select board and he's up there like, how can I answer these questions?
Mhm.
I wasn't even involved in the process, which is why why the change was recommended by the town clerk, by Larry, to make that change. That was early in the
I think
process.
that's a lot of common sense.
Yep. All right, great. Next, Lauren, I think we're good there.
Sorry. The next issue has to do with the size and manner of selection of the Board of Health. This was raised in the citizen correspondence, essentially suggesting that it go from 3 members to 5 members and that it be elected rather than appointed. Under the general laws, as I indicated previously, the size and manner of selection for any body, any board other than the select board can be changed by a town charter, as can the size of a committee. So certainly, the community has the authority to make a change of this type. I guess in terms of thinking about whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, which again, I'm not weighing in on, but I do suggest that you kind of think about some factors, which is what I usually suggest when boards are talking about, changing from elected to appointed or appointed to elected. And the first is, is there sufficient interest? Are there people always wanting to serve who don't get to because the same people are appointed over and over? So that's one. The second is, if at some point the board was an elected board, were there sufficient numbers of candidates so that there were contested races? And I also typically recommend looking at the current kind of situation with elected boards to see how many of those races are contested versus how many are, just one candidate seeking election. If the board if the committee were to recommend a change like this, we would also need to deal with a transition provision, which authorize, and I'm sure Larry is already writing that down, that we would need to have authorization in the charter to place those 2 new Board of Health seats on the ballot. So at an upcoming election. So we would have to address that.
So tonight, after Lauren speaks, we're going to talk with the Board of Health about going from 3 to 5. And in our last meeting, we talked about the going from an appointed board to an elected board. But don't, my opinion, I think that we were in agreement, correct me if I'm wrong, that this isn't the time or place to kind of try to change that from an appointed to an elected board. It was an elected board at one time, it moved to appointment, and there were reasons behind that. I think that's more of a referendum question for a town meeting, for it on a separate cause. But I think our biggest challenge that we have is that actually having, qualified individuals to be elected. And I think if you run into an election, you may run into a situation where you have unqualified individuals running for a post. Where appointed, at least you have the ability to kind of vet out individuals that have specific qualifications, experience, etc. So, any
Mr. Chair, if I could just,
questions?
oh,
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead, Lauren.
I just wanted to add to that the Board of Health is one of those boards where the general laws do suggest that you have people appointed who have different experience with health issues. However, there are many elected boards of health across the state. And there are many actual select boards that also serve as the board of health across the state. So it is done in various ways. And I think seeing the importance of the Board of Health through COVID, more attention has been focused on the Board of Health and what their responsibilities are than previously.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, next, town administrator residency requirement.
Yes. So the committee's proposal to the 2023 annual town meeting was essentially to remove the requirement that a town administrator who is not a resident of the town be required to move to town no later than 1 year after their appointment. So the committee, and as I recall, considered removal of that requirement for kind of practical reasons. I would characterize it as, meaning that there are fewer qualified candidates available for town administrator and town manager positions. And so by eliminating the residency requirement, it allows people who aren't interested in moving, but who would like to, to be appointed in the town to be candidates and or be appointed. The citizen correspondence essentially suggested that shouldn't be, that this should remain. There's no one right way, pluses and minuses for both approaches. And as you know, you've had this in your charter for quite some time, and the person who is town administrator has resided in town. So, as I said, there's no one right answer to this question.
Any questions? Okay, next.
Okay. Yes. So, although this provision may have seemed like a change, essentially what the committee had recommended with regard to the town administrator's appointing authority was to have the town administrator's appointments take effect within 15 days after the date that the person is appointed, unless the select board sooner accepts or rejects that recommendation. The point here is really not that the select board loses any power or that any power is being transferred to the town administrator. Instead, what it does is it provides a framework, a timeline for people who are applying to jobs to have a better feel for, number one, whether they are, going to be the kind of a finalist candidate. And number two, it reduces the time that they have to be kind of out there, I put it in quotes, with the fact that they're looking for another job and the date on which the select board would act on that. So again, I think especially with as the chair mentioned, qualified town employees are harder and harder to get. And so this is a mechanism that ensures that this can't be put off without the consequence of that appointment taking effect.
So can you summarize that? It sounded confusing, Lauren. there's it really, there's no real change here that I'm trying to follow this, because one of the things that I understood in this appointing authority is that it actually gives that person who's going to be appointed time to provide their notice, do all the things that you would normally do in the course of accepting a position in the town, correct?
It does do that. And I apologize, Mr. Chair, if it wasn't clear. The other thing it does is it means that that person isn't waiting 45 days or 2 months for action on a proposed appointment. So it's meant to benefit the appointee in that it sets up a time frame for action.
And any questions? We follow? Okay. All right, next, the negotiation collective bargaining.
Yeah, so the correspondence just kind of mentioned this. And as I recall, no changes were made to the select board as the appropriate public authority for purposes of collective bargaining. Instead, I think we made some language, just some word changes to make it more readable. In state law, the select board is the appropriate public authority for signing collective bargaining agreements. This doesn't change that. However, it does, as it did before, authorize the town administrator to do most of the negotiations. And as I indicated in the correspondence, that's a pretty standard provision in charters these days. So again, I would say doesn't change anything.
And I would see that too, is that the town administrator doesn't have that ability. You're really taking away their ability to do their job. I mean, that's really part of their role. You know, the hiring, the negotiation, et cetera, but it's the appointing authority as a select board that's still there. But you can't take that away from the town administrator.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, that's a really good point. And I think we should emphasize that a number of the changes that the committee had adopted essentially kind of provide notice to whoever in the future might be looking to be appointed as a town administrator that they do have certain independent authority and can, quote unquote, manage the town or administer the town and its day-to-day needs, rather than kind of being more like an executive secretary where every single thing that the individual does has to be approved by the select board.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. Any questions, clarifications? No? No? Okay, thank you. Next.
Okay. The next issue that was mentioned in the correspondence was the process for filling vacancies on elected multiple member boards. Your charter and state law provide that the board with the vacancy has to notify the select board within 30 days of the date of the vacancy. It then provides that the select board, after at least 1 week's notice, holds a joint meeting with the remainder of the members of the board with the vacancy. And so that's what your charter says right now. That's what chapter 40, section 11 says right now, 41, section 11. And essentially that's, in my kind of impression of that is it's attempting to balance two things. The first is, the select board is the chief elected official of the town. They were elected for the purpose of making policy and directing policy. And the second is that this process leaves a space for the board or committee with the vacancy to actually step to the table and have a vote. If the board with the vacancy doesn't notify the select board timely, then that balance switches and it's up to the select board only to make an appointment. So that's the current charter, that's current state law. The proposal or what was mentioned in the correspondence is the idea that after 30 days, if the board hasn't filled that vacancy, that instead authority would switch to if the select board hasn't filled the vacancy, it would switch to the board with the vacancy to make the appointment. And again, as I indicated earlier, this is something that the town can do by charter. Whether it's a good idea or a bad idea is different than, kind of what it proposes as compared to what's currently going on.
Do any towns do it that way?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
So it really, after 30 days, it would defer back to the select board for making that appointment, is how I would say the majority of towns in the Commonwealth support this. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of the time, appointments to fill elected positions are able to be done in a way that satisfies both boards, in my experience.
All right, thank you. Next, any questions, any further questions or comments?
I might have one later. I'm gonna reserve it for now, though.
Okay, sure. 9, qualifications for appointment of chief financial officer and town administrator.
Yes, so this was one of the things that was raised at town meeting and was addressed in the correspondence. The charter right now includes certain minimum qualifications for appointment as a chief financial officer or the town administrator. That is a policy decision for the town, whether to include those minimum requirements. Many charters do include those minimum requirements. That doesn't mean that the charter has to. In my experience, however, I haven't seen the minimum requirements removed from a charter where they're already present.
Any comments? No? Okay.
In regards to that, do you see any select boards getting involved in the hiring process?
For this, the town
These
administrator
positions.
so in most towns, the select board appoints the town administrator. And there's in some towns, the town administrator would thereafter appoint all department heads, such as yours. In other towns, department heads are also appointed by the town and by the select board. Those with a charter have been shifting some of that appointment authority to the town administrator for the same reason that we just discussed, essentially, that the town administrator is going to be working with these people and should have the authority to make the decision on who to hire.
The select board currently is the appointing authority of the town administrator. The town administrator then has the ability to hire department heads, fire chief, police chief, et cetera, if they're not an elected position. The select board, has always been, it's hiring again, this town hasn't hired a town administrator in 30+ years, but in most towns, as I've done my research, the towns will go out, will hire an executive search firm to help in that process, similar to what we did, the select board had done or Dennis had done when he was in that position for the fire chief, police chief, for those 2 positions. So what this is basically saying is that it really is the select board will appoint, and there's, the select board then, decides, I would think, but at this point in time,
If the select board's deciding, shouldn't they have a say in who that person is with regards to qualifications?
So do you want me to lay out
Sure.
what, so
please.
a consulting firm comes in, they meet with each individual member of the select board, along with other department heads within the town. And they get background from those individuals as to what they would hope to see in a town administrator. They also will go through the charter and also go through the functions of the town, the size of the town, the budget of the town, functions within the charter, things like that, to put together a job description that typically goes up in Massachusetts, it goes up on the MMA.org website. That's the primary source where people look for these jobs. They send their resumes, cover letters to the consulting firm. The consulting firm works exactly the same as they did for the police and fire search, which is that they do the initial review, the initial background check, they go through a screen. They end up whittling it down to, say, top 10, then top 3 are the only names that come before us. The process to go forward now is those top 3 would end up coming in open meeting, each in open meeting, and the consulting firm would interview them in front of the board in open meeting. So each select board member has their opportunity to meet individually. Some of us met today. To go with the consulting firm to state their concerns or their hopes for what they wish to see for a future town administrator.
But what I've seen by looking at many charters is that it's not uncommon, as Lauren suggested as well, to have a minimum requirement in the charter to start with. And then from there, be up to the select board to determine what are those requirements, what does this town need at this specific time? And then they write a job requirement, job description, and they would work with that commit, they would work with that recruiting firm to then post that to, like any other normal position. The town administrator is the chief executive officer.
But the
So-
charter doesn't do the hiring, it's selected.
Right.
So shouldn't the select board work on the requirements as opposed to the charter? Take it out of the charter and hand it over to the select board?
No,
No.
because that is because you
Folks,
because you don't. A select board is always changing, so you're always going to have different ideas. The charter is what is essentially governing the town, and that's the guidelines that any elected member of any board should refer
Okay.
back to. That being said, the select board could all, like I said, will have the opportunity to talk with the consultants. And the select board and the chair and our HR director will see any placement or any wording before it goes out. Most I keep saying ads, but it's way more. If you look at them, most of them are 4-page job
Yeah.
descriptions. Most of them do have minimum qualification as a bachelor's with master's preferred, along with between 5 and 10 years
Mhm.
experience. Both of those end up being necessary minimum requirements
Okay,
for that position.
you know, you think of it in terms of our constitution. There's a minimum requirement to be the president of the United States. They have to be a naturalized US citizen, and they've got to be 35 years of age, right? And then, of course, there's all the other stuff that goes on. But the point is, the charter established at the very beginning a minimum requirement, which is a recommendation, because they started from the template. We didn't change in 2013, and as Lauren pointed out, there's no reason to pull it out at this point in time. If
Okay.
it's, that's why it's there. It's a minimum requirement. It doesn't mean that that's the person that'll be hired. You know, what if we don't receive any applicants that have a bachelor's degree? That's a possibility, right?
Mhm.
Then it's up to the select board to make that decision,
okay,
you know? But you've got to have a basis, a minimum at, you know, at best. At a minimum, you've got to have a basis to start from. Lauren, did you have a comment? You said yes. Did you have anything else? to
Yes,
add?
I just wanted to add that the select board as the appointing authority is not required to appoint anyone. So a person could come in with perfect qualifications. It still doesn't mean that the select board is required to appoint that person. For whatever reason, the select board can make the decision not to, could send it back to the screening firm and or follow a different path. So this is essentially just setting the floor for the community's expectations. The appointment, when it's made, has to be something that the select board feels comfortable with.
okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Any further? I heard a lot of rumbling. Does anyone have anything else to add or commentary? Yes, Mr. Soder?
Yes, I'm here, not as your state rep, I'm here as resident. I guess my concern is, what I don't understand is, you're using the Constitution, and that's fine, it doesn't have an education requirement. But I guess my question is, why are you taking the ability out of the elected board, the Board of Selectmen? You just said, if all your qualifications came in with all of the applicants came in with no qualifications, you have the ability to hire that person. But in one breath, you want all these qualifications. So why wouldn't you leave it up to the Board of Selectmen, who's the elected authority of the town, who everybody can vote in and out, to make those stipulations and those criteria? Fine, you want to hire a firm, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the reality of it is that you can have that same criteria, have the Board of Selectmen. I sat on that board. I mean, you can, the Board of Selectmen, the same people that, you know, might not agree with that now, are the same people that are electing that Board of Selectmen. So they can, or Select Board, they can actually put the criteria forward of what they want and say, if we don't get these particular applicants, then we can go to this set of applicants. What you just said totally contradicted, and your counsel just reiterated and agreed with you that if there's nobody that's there, you can hire.
She said if there's no one.
No, 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 no. hold
You
on,
can
hold on.
appoint, you don't have to appoint those people.
Thank you, you're kind.
Wait a minute, wait, another point. You made a comment about other towns. There are other towns, not every town, there are other towns that don't put this in the charter. They don't put this in the charter, they put it in the hands of the Board of Selectmen, who are very successful. Okay, we've got to stop realizing what you're doing is that you're making it harder and harder. We're not hiring a Dennis Frame. There are some people here that work very hard. I see Geek Let's here, work very hard on the original charter, okay? And we're part of it. You are the people that work very hard on this with a lot of intentions to put a lot of safeguards in for the Board of Selectmen, the elected body, to make some decisions. You know, you can I've seen people with master's degrees get walked out of corporations and government agencies in handcuffs.
Okay, I don't think that comment, so, hold on, I'm gonna respond, I'm gonna let.
So not
So
everybody's
what-
perfect
so
because
what
they have a
you just-
mask.
So what you just said, let me just finish, what you just said is Mr. Foote worked very hard on we're not adding, we're leaving it in. We're saying we're not gonna take it out, we're not gonna take the minimum requirement out that's been in the charter since 2004. That's what we're saying, we're not adding to it.
So you're not going to the May 10th changes that you made? You're
We
going with the
haven't
original charter?
taken a final vote, Mr. Soder, okay? We may, who knows? It all depends on the opinion of the town. Kelly.
So I
Mr.
just
Green
wanted
has
to
comment
make one
first.
comment, and that is, you're right, we're elected by the citizens and everyone has a right to speak on behalf of the citizens. Well, most of the citizens who are here want a minimum education requirement, and they expressed that at our last meeting. So that is another reason why we were going and talking about it and why we're talking about it again.
With all due respect, it got voted down by an overmajority at town meeting because they're concerned about some of this.
No,
It
no,
was
all right,
passed
all right,
over.
all right.
Not everybody should, you know that,
All right, all right,
they don't show up at every meeting.
Sorry.
It's not
Mr.
convenient.
Follett- Mr. Follett was next.
Thank
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martinez. I just want to clarify that when this was drafted in 02, 03, there was discussion about educational requirements, and we tried to do is set a floor, minimum requirements. Remember, they're not maximum requirements. Board of Selectmen can add any other stipulations it cares to at any time. Matches are worth considering. My other recommendation is, I don't know what the market's like out there. How many people who might be town administrators have masters today? I'm not familiar with that, so I don't know if that hurts or helps in attracting people. Whereas if you make it a preference, I think we allow a lot of flexibility. When we designed, the committee back in 02, 03, the charter, one of the things we tried to keep in mind as a guiding principle was to provide both direction and structure, but also recognizing that the town basically changed a lot of the independent boards, as you know, had to in order to be able to control our finances. That was the real reason. And we went into problems prior years because you're dependent on each board to do its task. If it doesn't, you're stymied under the old law. Okay, you understand?
I absolutely understand.
So, yeah, I mean, we tried to not overrule things, okay, too tight. But at the same time, we want a certain minimums in certain areas. And again, it's optional, but that's why it was
Yeah.
put there.
So I think that and I appreciate that, because what you said is really what I said, is that there's got to be a minimum requirement for direction and structure, which is what you required. Many people here at the last meeting were saying, we want a minimum of a master's degree, right? Well, I agree with you, because masters should be preferred. It can't be a requirement, because we will minimize the candidate pool by putting in required. We will also minimize the candidate pool by saying they must live in the town of Bellingham. Because you could live in Milford, have your children in the school system in Milford, and then be told before you have to force them, that person's gonna withdraw their name, and they may be the best candidate for that position. So that's why we We talked a long time about that, and at that time, almost a year ago, we all agreed it makes sense to pull that out. We shouldn't force someone to live in this town. Dennis, and I know because I've had those personal conversations, was hired out of Boston, moved to Uxbridge, lived in Uxbridge for a while, and then he decided to move his family to Bellingham, not because he was required, because he wanted to move to Bellingham. That was his decision, and he stayed here and built a nice family. We can't force someone in any job market today to live in this town. I mean, there are so I will say that it is my recommendation that it's up to the select board, okay, to set along with HR, to set those requirements, working with the consultants, because they know what's best, they know what's in the market, they know what's available. We don't, you don't, we think we know, but they're the ones that do that day in and day out. It's their job to do that, which is why you bring the experts in to do that, to find the best possible candidate. So, ma'am, you're in the back, please, just state your name, please, and your
I'm Dina
address.
Abernathy. I live at 5 Kennedy Road. Been a resident of Bellingham. I've been here since 5th grade. Okay, so graduated 2004. Moved my family here 7 years ago. So my question is, so first off, we don't really know when the town meetings are, because it's not really put in a, like that website is like a dinosaur, okay? Like, we need a website, it's 2023, guys. We need a website where everyone can access it, everyone can see it, see when the town meetings are, the second Wednesday of every month. Like, why is it then? People have jobs, people have families. I don't know who's making that like a requirement.
I just pause you for a second.
But-
But
What do you mean by town meeting?
So you guys are saying this right here, right now?
This is not a.
No.
So
So-
this is a committee meeting. So when we
So
say
so any of the
town
meetings,
meeting,
really any of the meetings.
so they're all on the calendar and there isn't, hang on, Mr. Hanway. So there is, I can show you too. There is actually a section on the town website where you can subscribe to any one of the committees or boards, and then you're actually emailed all the agendas and when the meetings are.
So
So
is
if
that
there's one
communicated
that's,
somewhere for everyone to see?
there's actually a
Yeah,
button right on the front
but
page.
like not on the website though.
On the
Yeah.
website, there's actually a button where it says
Right,
subscribe
But
here.
somewhere else where people can access to say, it's on the website, here it is. You know what I'm saying?
so to this meeting, and I appreciate the comments, but for tonight's meeting, this isn't about that. That's something you should.
Oh, and okay, so I'll talk,
Probably
I
a
just wanted to say that
select board
first. So
That's
the
fine.
town
Yeah.
administrator position, how much does that pay a year?
That it varies, it's negotiable.
Okay. So for a job, like for requirement, so I have my bachelor's degree in psych, so just like as an example.
Mhm.
So it's hard for me to get a job that pays just enough to pay my bills right now, right? So for you to have a job as a town administrator, to pay probably a decent amount where I can pay my bills and be very successful on my own, even with my 2 kids, not even having my husband in the picture. I feel like a master's degree maybe should be something we should think about, because I can barely get a job with my bachelor's psychology degree. Do you know what I'm saying? So in that
Yeah,
respect, and then also just in regards to, like, a lot of people don't even know that this position is up for grabs. And like, that should be known, and also how much is the people who you want to hire, like the consulting firm, how much would that cost the townspeople to?
I'll allow Kelly because she's involved, she's on the select.
So in regards to position being available, so there is, as I mentioned before, MMA.org is the Mass Municipal Association website. So typically that is the first line where people who are looking for a position as town administrator go to look. And there are many other listings other than just town administrator. It can be anything from a library
Right, I've
assistant
seen that. I
to,
know exactly. what you're talking about,
so that's typically where they all are, and that's the first line of defense. There are we have been discussing the potential to have this position. It wasn't until recently that we knew we needed to go out and look.
Yeah.
I can tell you just from experience of other towns who have hired town administrators recently. So Hopedale just hired a town administrator. They had 18 candidates come forward for that position. The town of Franklin was looking for an assistant town manager. They had 121 people apply for that position.
What were their degrees in? Did they have?
They needed minimum bachelor's degree, master's preferred with either public administration or
Business leaders.
business, for that.
Yeah.
That
makes sense for the role that they're
And that
applying
makes a
for,
lot of
right?
sense. And
Of course.
typically, if you go on to, I keep saying MMA because that's what I'm familiar with.
Mhm.
If you go on to the MMA's website and pick any town manager or town administrator position on there, they're one and the same. It's just how the different town charters refer to it.
Right.
Most of them do say bachelor's must, master's preferred, and preference is given in a screening to someone who has a master's, but you have to have the experience as well.
Of course.
So
yeah.
most people are not going to come in or need to have at least 7 to 10 years municipal paid experience within a municipality
Right.
before they'll even be considered for a town administrator position. A lot of people start in an office and
Right.
work their way up.
As they should, right, in any profession, I wouldn't feel, and then in regards to, I personally, and I'm speaking for myself right now, obviously, I'm not gonna speak for anybody. I don't feel comfortable having a town administrator that doesn't live in my town. End of story. You should have to live in the
Can I ask
town,
you a question?
what is that?
Excuse me?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Why?
Because.
I tend to agree with
Yeah, because I feel like, so I'm back in Bellingham for multiple reasons, right? I love the community aspect here. We are a big town, but we're not, you know what I mean? I have lifelong friends that are from town. I have an amazing neighborhood right now at Kennedy Road. So I just feel like to get that camaraderie and that community feeling, you're gonna have somebody live in, let's just throw it out there, like Everett, just throwing out and then you're gonna be the town administrator for Bellingham? How does that make any logical sense whatsoever?
May I add?
And then we're gonna end it. That's not why we're here tonight, but I appreciate your comments. Go ahead.
So the select board would have the ability to say, we would rather look at candidates within, say, 15 miles, which is generally what civil service tells you. We're still a civil service town. So it's generally 15 miles. However, and there are lots of town administrators that live an hour away. My question back would be, would you prefer if you had the choice between a candidate who lived in town or a more qualified and more experienced candidate who did not live in town, who could do a better job? Which
So,
would
but they
you
get
want?
a year, right? Like, so and right now in the charter, they have a year. And I feel like that's a decent amount of time to figure out if it's a good fit for the town and for the person.
And let me just respond. However, in the current charter,
Yes.
if that were in there, the select board still has the ability to waive that requirement. So for example, you could be hired.
After a
and
year though,
you-
right?
You could be hired, you live in town, your husband gets, or your significant other gets a job, 40 miles away, you decide you need to move to Walpole.
Okay,
The town, you could then say to the select board, well, I said I was gonna stay here, but I really need to move to Walpole. I'm only 15, 20 minutes away, but I wanna live in Walpole. So there needs to be a provision in there, kind of a catch-all that's gonna support, because you may be highly qualified, you're doing a wonderful job, we don't wanna lose you. But you'd be forcing our hand by moving to Walpole. You have to the select board would have to terminate you because you don't live in the town. So you really have to think about it you also really do it in today's day and age, in the virtual world that we're in. It's really, you don't find people that will be forced to move to a town and take a job. They won't do it because one, part of the job can be done remotely and it really can be.
right, but then that takes away the community feel, like, I wanna be able to know where my town administrator lives.
And we don't have time to debate this. I think we hear what you say.
Yeah.
But think about that. Would you force the superintendent of schools to live in town? Would you force the principals of each
right?
town? No, we
No.
don't. No.
Yes,
No.
they used to.
No.
Well, but they're not required
They're
to.
not required. They
Right,
lived
okay,
here, but they weren't
that's fine,
required.
right, and that's
So
fine.
the point is, what you're saying is that the town administrator must live in town, but the superintendent doesn't need to live in town?
Is there a difference in pay scale for those two
The
positions?
superintendent makes
Actually-
more money.
Yeah, okay. Right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And their children, the superintendent of schools' children go to school in a different town.
I totally understand. I
So you
don't
can't do that.
agree. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and I don't want someone to feel like they must live in the town, but also if you're gonna go for a town administrator position, shouldn't you have some bonding to the town that you're applying for as a town administrator?
I think most of them do, and I mean, for example, the town administrator in Medway.
Yeah.
He usually lives here.
In Bellingham.
Yeah.
Um,
We're all, I mean, I like to think that we're all kind of part of the same community, even though all those towns look far better than us, but that's a whole nother ballgame that we're talking about.
Tonight.
Yeah, not tonight.
All right, well, thank you very much.
you.
Ms. Genesee?
Mike Hennessy, 70 Muron Ave. I just wanted to bring up the point, you're bringing up the firm that's looking for the select, for the town administrator. You did say that only 3 of them come to the select board. Why can't we see all the candidates?
because as the consulting firm will tell you when you meet with them tomorrow, which I believe is happening. A lot of people in a extremely professional position such as this, and the same thing would happen with CFO. And the same thing has happened for people that we've interviewed for other positions, like assistant DPW director. They don't want their names out there right immediately for anonymity purposes because they are still working. Most places will not, most professionals will not apply if they know that the town they're working for is gonna know they're in an interview process 60 days ahead of time.
But you just said that the select board has all this. Why are you keeping, if there's 140 candidates applying for a position, why are you keeping them from the select board from seeing who it is, looking at their qualifications?
Because that's, first of all, so the consulting firm, that's what they do. They screen for all of this, and you'll be able to ask your own questions.
I have a list of questions and the other.
All right, I'm gonna put here, this is not a select board
No.
meeting,
I got you.
okay? So
I'm talking
take
as
that
a
up tomorrow.
as a resident.
So that, but take that up tomorrow, because first of all, I'll just say this, being in a professional business for many, many years, it's very inefficient to interview 20, 30 candidates. The reason why you pre-screen, you do that, is you want to whittle the candidates down that you feel are most.
We're not,
qualified.
I'm not talking interviewing, I'm talking just, I mean, they can black their name out, just seeing their qualifications. And
That's
also,
why you hire recruiting firms to do just
To do
that,
that.
professional business.
but then the other thing I have is just for public record. Only 2 members of the select board knew about the consulting firm, 2 members were left in the dark about it.
Again, this is not for this meeting.
That's fine, I just want to go on record, just making it known that you left 2 members of the select board in the dark with this.
All right, first of all, that will not be in our minutes, because this is not a select board meeting.
Okay.
This is a charter review meeting, so that will not be in the minutes,
It's on
So
TV,
it-
that's fine.
okay? That's something you take up with the select board, you're a select board member.
I'll bring it up
You
tomorrow.
know, the chair, thank you. All right, one more, unless there's something new, then I'm gonna move on. If there's something new, I want to hear it, and please. Stand up, please, stand up and state your name, please.
Steve Montegani, 323 Hartford Ave. I just don't understand why we continue down this road. Until you have a issue with the minimum required, like you don't get any candidates, we shouldn't even be discussing it. There is no reason to even talk about changing the charter. If the firm gets, it sounds like other towns have got 100, 200 candidates, they can filter them down. Why are we even talking about removing the minimum? There's no reason, unless you run into, we have 0 candidates. So I think this is just a moot point. I think we move on and go forward.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hamway, and then we're gonna move on.
Ken Hamway, 39 Weathersfield Road. I just want to say this, we have one town in the state of Massachusetts that has a town administrator with just a high school diploma. That's 1 over 351 in terms of fractions. You know what that comes out in terms of a percentage? 0.002 of 1%. That's the amount of towns in this state that have a town administrator with just a high school diploma. Now, that's a deplorable number. I'll give you another number that's kind of interesting. Our graduating class at Bellingham High School, 116 seniors. 93 are going on to schools of higher education. That's 80%. The minimum requirement for the town administrator must rest with the charter. It's our constitution. I would never give it to the Board of Selectmen, the minimum requirements, because that board's always changing. Okay, that's how I feel about it. You've got the US Constitution is to America what the charter is to Bellingham. Let's not forget that.
Thank you very much. I think we've exhausted this comment. I want to thank everybody for their thoughtfulness. And really coming here tonight and speaking how you feel as citizens, which is your right to do in the town of Bellingham. So, Lauren has been sitting here very patiently, and we have a few more items that we need to review. So Lauren, can you stay on, because I know that you're on vacation, and we really appreciate you doing this for us. So I'll let you move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also would like to remain married to my husband of many years, so I have to try and wrap things up if possible. All right, so number 10 is there was a comment in the correspondence about delegating responsibilities of the town administrator being a bad policy choice, and different language was proposed, which I included in the memo, that would essentially be a formal transfer of authority from the town administrator to another. I wanted to point out that with or without that language, the town administrator on a daily basis does delegate authority to others, and that authority essentially it always comes back to the town administrator. If the town administrator has someone do something for him and it doesn't work out well, that person may have some responsibility for it, but the town administrator is going to answer to the select board. So that happens on a daily basis. I think that as I recall, the point of including a provision in the town administrator's responsibilities and powers about delegation was simply to kind of underscore that ultimately the town administrator is responsible for the town administrator's responsibilities under the charter. So it wasn't in my view, it wasn't providing any new authority. It was reminding the town administrator, yes, there are going to be other people that are helping to do this job, but ultimately it's the town administrator's responsibility.
Great.
No.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. And then the last thing that was in the correspondence was about the process for appointing temporary or interim town administrator and the authority of the position. I know the committee talked a lot about this, and we've kind of had we've had experience with this issue relatively recently. The concept, as I remember the discussion going, was that there was some concern that people's roles weren't entirely clear, that there was no kind of fallback position if maybe the town administrator hadn't designated a particular person as a temporary administrator for those purposes. And so the revisions that the committee recommended, and as you pointed out, they're actually just like two sentences at the end of, I think it's 4-3-1 and 4-3-2. So the idea was that there be a process to go through. The correspondence says if a temporary absence extends beyond 60 calendar days, the select board will essentially move to fill the vacancy to continue to fill the temporary absence, or move in the same manner as filling a vacancy to fill the temporary absence. In my view, that language doesn't add to the committee's recommended language, because the committee's recommended language did address that if there is an extended time period. Also, I think we had talked a little bit earlier about directory versus mandatory. And in my opinion, no court would take the position that the select board doesn't have the authority to appoint someone to run the day-to-day affairs of the town. So I think the provisions that the committee had addressed were sufficient for that. And then that second portion was similar. The charter can address the process for filling a temporary absence or permanent vacancy differently. If that's the, you know, the will of the municipality, of the community. But you know, again, I think the intention, as I recall, for the committee's recommendations was to ensure that there were no kind of gaps in government, and to make sure that business could continue as usual. That's the end.
That's the end. Is there any questions for Lauren before we let her go? Yes, sir.
I just, Mike Peasy, Weathersfield Road, Bellingham. The question is there any circumstances where if the minimum requirement is in the charter, the selectman could waive it and hire somebody that doesn't meet the requirements? Like you said, they could waive
So,
the residency requirement.
well, technically, yeah, I would think the select board as the appointing authority, they're gonna go with the minimum requirement. If, in fact, if, let's say, 20 candidates apply for the position and none of them meet the minimum requirements, the select board then has a decision to make. Do they change? Do they hire someone without those minimum requirements, or do they defer and continue the search? That's how it is.
That's what, yeah.
That's what any normal business would do, right? In this
Mr. Chair.
I understand that, but if it's in the charter, it can be waived.
Mr. Chair?
Not
No,
technically.
let-
Yeah,
let-
Lauren, you answer that question.
Yeah, thank you. I think I had mentioned earlier, I mean, as someone said, the charter is to the town like the Constitution is to the country. And that is actually the case in my view. This is essentially, the charter sets up the best case scenario, you know, what the town is aspiring to do. However, if the town is unable to do something that's in the charter, and I had mentioned, like if something isn't filed on time or something like that, unless there's a specific repercussion, then it's directory. And so I've actually been involved in litigation in a relatively decent sized town where the person who was most favored by the select board for appointment was a person who didn't meet the minimum requirements in the charter. And, you know, it was my opinion that that select board still retained the right as the appointing authority to appoint who it felt was properly, you know, the proper person for the position. I will say that the select board in that town had to answer to the fact that that person didn't have the minimum qualifications as set forth in the charter. It didn't prevent the appointment from going forward, but it did hold that select board accountable essentially for why they didn't believe that the you know, the other candidates shouldn't be appointed. So again, you know, a lot of these things are case by case, but in this situation, I feel relatively confident that the select board isn't giving anything away by you know, not changing that. But I mean, sorry, by not taking those provisions out of the charter.
Still not understanding it. So there's been a lot of back and forth about whether we put this in the charter or not. Does it matter?
It's already in the chart.
It's
All right,
already in the
about
charter.
taking it out. If it is in the charter, does it matter?
It sets a
It sets a standard that can be waived.
It sets a standard for the town moving forward. It sets, as Mr. Willett elegantly said, it sets a direction and a standard that started in 2004 and to continue. And that's really, again, it's up to the town at the end of the day, right?
No, I know,
Does
but
the town
can
want-
we,
does the town want a qualified individual or an unqualified individual?
that's what the question is, I agree with it, should be in there.
Yeah.
But I just want to know, does it really matter? Can it be waived?
It would, I think it would be under really extreme circumstances that it would be waived. Because what you're gonna find today, that anyone that's applying for a position of a town administrator or town manager is highly likely is gonna have a business degree in public administration, may even have a master's degree. You don't see individuals that aren't in this world all of a sudden have an epiphany and say, hey, I want to be a town administrator and not have any experience. You don't see that. It's just, it's like someone trying to, you know, oh, I don't have a PhD in pharmacy, but I'm going to be a research person for you know, a medical device company.
I understand, and in the best case scenario, that's true, but I've seen some strange things happen.
Well, yeah, and I think, and that's a really good point, Mr. Peasy, because what we're trying to prevent are the real strange things from happening. Is, again, this is to protect the town, not just today, but for many years from now, which is why back when, you know, before town meeting, and we had the unfortunate incident where, you know, Dennis, our town administrator, had left unexpectedly. There were really no provisions on how to, again, have the continuation of government. It worked. We just wanted to make sure it was called out. So if this were to ever happen again, there's a process defined in place. And that's all we did. We didn't change anything. We just added a process to make it
Mr.
clear for those select board members down the road. Okay, there it is. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may interrupt, yeah, I think, you know, the question of whether it matters, again, you know, the select board is an elected body. And if the select board were to hire someone who didn't have those qualifications, but who was otherwise especially qualified, the voters could share their opinions at the polls. And so, you know, the select board is directly responsible to the voters. And with that, Mr. Chair, if I may, I would love to get off this call. Thank you. I'm happy to come back anytime and address any other questions. So please just let me know if you'd like me to be there.
Will do. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Have a good
Thanks,
evening.
Lauren.
Enjoy your
Bye.
time off.
Mr. Chair, can I just
Good-
ask,
Good night, everyone.
not for Laura,
Good
for
night.
you,
Hi.
or for the committee? Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
You just made a comment that we didn't have a continuation of government when unforeseen
We-
circumstances.
We did.
You did, because the charter clearly states it, that you have a flow of what you do in a temporary absence. You've got 10 days to make an appointment. And after that 10 days, you can appoint for 90 days, and then you can appoint for another 90 days, and then another 90 days. You have a charter that clearly outlined that you can decide what is a temporary absence and what is not a temporary absence. You do have a flow of government. So I don't know, what did you do then if you didn't have a flow of government? What did you follow?
All we did, and it wasn't in that paragraph, Mr. Soto, all we did was in there, I forget which one off the top of my head, is we just carved out that the select board, because when Mr. Frame went out unexpectedly, all right, we sat down, we looked at the charter to see what we could do. And it wasn't clear that the select board, right, had the authority under Mass General Law. They did. So we actually reached out to the town council, said, here's the situation. We want to appoint an interim town administrator so we can have a continuation of government. They referred to Mass General Law and basically came back and said, it's the select board's decision. So all we did was add that the select board has the ability to do so it wasn't in the previous charter. It didn't carve out that the select board had the ability to appoint a temporary or interim town administrator. It's all we added. We didn't change that. We didn't change it. We just made it specific that the select board had the ability. And you're probably not able to see that because of the way the red line was created. But if you compare the old and the new, you'll see there's just a sentence added to that provision.
Well, the old says that you have 10 working days
That's
and
the
then
next
90,
provision.
and then you have 10 working days to figure out what's going on, then you have 90 days to appoint, and then another 90 days. So I don't understand how.
What you don't understand, Mr. Soter, is that is talking about if the town
Temporary
administrator.
absence, you don't know if it's a temporary or permanent.
You don't know if it was a temporary. We didn't know if his absence was temporary or long-term. So that's why it was added. So we're gonna move on from here. Yes.
Want to clarify something? you
Sure.
said To make sure it's accurate. You used the word "we." I don't know if that's accurate.
All right.
You
Bill.
provided,
Aye.
excuse me, you provided language to this board
Mhm.
2 hours before we met on May 10th. I expressed to you, I felt it was rushed. And it was rather dismissive. I thought that legally would have to go to the floor, and I was not listened to. We get a majority of people at the town meeting to agree that this process might have been rushed. My big concern was what happened on May 10th.
Okay.
And you
that's why we're
opened the
here
meeting,
today.
and you apologized, that you didn't, or at one point, you apologized, you did not give us enough time. That was my big concern with the language. We did not have enough time to look at it prior to the meeting and prior to the town meeting.
And that's fair.
Then
And
I'm
we,
just,
and we addressed that the last meeting,
correct,
and that's why we're here tonight.
correct.
So we move on. Thank you. Mrs. Grant, did you have a comment? All right. All right, so next on the agenda was the discussion for the Board of Health. There was a point brought up during our meetings about moving from a 3-member board to a 5-member board. Just to let everybody know, Mr. Frame and myself and Mr. Sposato went to a Board of Health meeting. We had a discussion about why we thought it might be relevant to move from 3 to 5. And we had that discussion. There was no decision made by this committee to change that. So it never changed in the charter. So it's been raised again by Mr. Ranieri and a few others. So if you wouldn't mind, Larry, I know that I'm at this point have had enough conversations where I'm ambivalent to whether it's 3 or 5. I think it's very difficult to find 5 members. I'm certainly not in favor of moving it to an elected position, but that's my opinion and my opinion only. I think it's very difficult. It's also a position, an appointed, the Board of Health plays a critical role in this town. And it's important to have experience on that board. It's not always the case. The town does its best, find and recruit and appoint the best possible candidate. So again, Mr. Sposato, I don't know if you have any comments. You were in favor of going from 3 to 5, if I recall. Maybe you could share your opinion with the committee.
Do we want to ask Mr. Fort to come up?
Mr. Fort, you can come on up and sit, and then I'll let this isn't an inquisition.
No, it's fine.
Conversation.
With the committee or with the group?
You're having a discussion with us. So
Okay.
your
So,
opinion as to why it should go from 3 to 5.
Okay, so during COVID, as was mentioned earlier, there were a lot of important decisions that were made and had to be made quickly. Personally, it goes beyond that for me because what I don't understand through Mass General Law is that these very important decisions can be made, but there's really not a process to review or recall them when the situation is resolved. I understand the need to take action really quickly, but I'm not sure that that should stay in place after the fact. But the reason that I think it should be a 5-member board is because right now with a 3-member board, there's 2 people constitute a majority. And so those 2 people can make these, if they're in agreement, can make these wide scope, wide sweeping regulation changes. And I think that there should be at least a 5-member board, so there's more input into those decisions, because if 2 people are, constantly voting together, then for the 3rd person, it's impossible for them to make a change or do anything to change that. So that's why I think, and all of our boards, except for the Board of Health, are at least 5 members. And most of those boards do not have the same kinds of impact in some of the regulations, the health regulations. So that was my concern.
Anybody else on the board have similar concern or opposing view?
Similar concern,
No, makes sense to me.
but I'm willing to hear the other side as well, obviously.
I have only heard from Board of Health members that a 5-member board would actually be a good thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't actually think there's anyone that would be against it going
Okay.
to a 5-member board. I would
Oh,
also,
okay.
I would also agree that I wouldn't want to see it an elected position, just because I do think we would have trouble finding qualified candidates to pull papers to be elected. As we see with some of our elections go uncontested, so that might be difficult to do, but I have no issue whatsoever going to a 5-member board. I think it will make it easier for the members of the Board of Health, like Larry said.
I mean, I'll echo what Larry said, it's not always 2 people come up with an idea and it happens. The 3rd person, whoever that gets to be, because your chair, then your vice chair, and then your member. So that cycle right now, every 3 years, the chair really runs a meeting, doesn't make a decision. I like to say on most of the boards of health I've been on for 28.5 years, all three of us were unanimous on that decision, especially when they came to passing regulations that we really never thought could come about, but because people can't get along with people violate clean water, rules, they violate public health rules. And this board is, I'm gonna say, very important. The myriad of things we have control of. And it's why the state legislature set it up, so that the Board of Health has basically, the powers to do it, has to do with creating regulations, policing them, and adjudicating them, not having to go to town meeting.
May I ask you a question? Yes. So, 3-member board, are you able to accomplish what you need to accomplish with 3? How stretched thin you are? Because I was one in favor of 5, and I'm still thinking that I like 5, but I'm not gonna push it. I'm gonna let them, let them decide. And it was, are you stretched really thin? And not because of other issues, but as your day-to-day Board of Health requirements, are the 3 stretched thin?
Well, right now, I'm acting health agent.
I said regardless of that, forget about that for a minute, right?
So,
And in normal, when you have a full-time health agent,
Right.
Can you get the work done?
No, as long as, like, recently, because of the pandemic, obviously we can zoom in. So if 2 members were out, you couldn't have a meeting.
Mhm.
But if 1 member's not there and 2 others are present, we still can have that member in. And the decision is important to have 3 people deciding on something, Now, if we have 5, my only comment is, I thought of what you said, and a few other people I talked to said that are elected boards. They said, well, Board of Health should never be a popularity contest. It's way too important. From my background in military medicine, moving into environmental science, hazmat and all that stuff was all related basically to the government, but it also came back to, I live in this town and things happened I couldn't believe, in the middle of the night. So the Board of Health was out there with fire and police. But the other issue is, we weren't out there just worried about like traffic control and potential for a fire and explosion. It's the toxicity. It gets into groundwater, and then people come up with strange diseases and cancer, and it's probably, things get spilled, no one knows about it. And, we're hoping, usually I'd say the Grapevine pretty good in any town, and people see something now, they say something. So we have a couple of things going on right now where, people are getting a Board of Health order to correct that.
So you saying that if
I'm for
4 or 5?
5, and I'm for appointed versus the other thing.
Yeah.
That's
So
what I
if
was
you have
just gonna
something-
Get
I was
elected.
just gonna ask if he was for appointed or elected.
Originally, I was thinking elected, and I said, you know what, I'm done after that. But I said, no, there's echoing of other people. It's not a popularity contest. So, another thing too is when you get someone elected there, they may or may not be qualified. What I would hope with an appointed board, as is right now, I think it's worked out in this town, that we get 2 more members. And it may be hard, but the Board of Health sits in with the Board of Selectmen and make sure you're not just, I don't want a body, and I don't think the other members just want a body there. So that I can talk to you, because you're on the Board of Health, about something as we're going out the door, and I'm saying, well, okay, it's a violation. But if I had that 4th or 5th member, then I don't have a quorum. That means it's not a violation.
Yeah, well, that makes it very difficult when you have 3 members on a committee and you
Correct.
can't have a conversation with another
You
member.
can't even like, how do I say, it? You say something
That's
not
very challenging.
Yeah, everything has to be an open meeting.
automatically.
Yeah,
People don't think of that open meeting laws.
Right.
You really need to have a larger body. So, like, for example, so I could have a conversation about something and not be breaking open meeting laws. If there is only 3 members on that committee, we're breaking open meeting laws. It really curbs your efficiency and your productivity.
So, I mean, that's, my opinion. I think at this point, over the years, we had people, like, we had a lawyer, we had let's say, what do you call it, like a plan writing community, emergency response plan writing person. We've had a lot of people with nursing, not doctors, but nursing background, medical background, whether it's military, whether it's civilian life, So, and that said, one other thing I might throw out there is like, sort of like we're talking about, residency requirement, if we go to 5 and we can't get somebody who's qualified in Bellingham to be on the Board of Health, we can say, I believe Larry brought this up to me, that the Board of Selectmen would always look to a resident first. But if you don't have anybody qualified, I'm hoping the Board of Selectmen doesn't just, as long as I'm on the board, right now I'm chair, but give me as a member of the Board of Health, someone who's totally not qualified. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
There are a lot of healthcare workers that live in Bellingham.
Right.
I think the important thing is to get the word out.
Correct.
And we need to, at a separate time, we need to talk a little more about that.
Right.
But I think that if the word is out there, there would be people that would be interested.
Yeah. I understand, absolutely. It would be helpful. And again, I think it's not this committee, but another, maybe a subcommittee to figure out how to get information out other than the Bellingham Unplugged nasty stuff, on Facebook. Did you have a comment, Mr. O'Connell? No? And no? Mr. Salisbury, Mr. Calamati, I know you've been quiet in there. Any comments on the Board of Health?
I don't feel one way or the other is okay with me. I can understand the pros and cons of both. I have no urge of going to 5 and I have no urge of staying at 3.
Right.
I mean, let's talk to we just spoke to heard from the gentleman who was on the Board of Health.
Right.
And he raised some valid points when they can't get 2 people for a quorum, and there is some stuff that has to be dealt with. I know if you're a contractor or if you're doing things in town that needs to be permitted, it's kind of tough when you can't get at least 3 people together to tell you, you got to get, here's your permit, or here's what you're going to do to get your permit. And things like that. I can understand that because I've had situations like that in other towns.
Okay. Any comments from the public? Brian? Oh, thank you.
Just a
Did you
quick
have any
question.
comments?
Just a quick question about general interest in the past, and would we be creating a quorum situation if, let's say that we go to a 5-member board, there's no interest. So are we creating a situation where it needs to be unanimous decision 3 out of 5, but they don't have 4 and 5? And do we think about phasing it in over time? I have no horse in the race, 5 versus 3. I'm just thinking
That's a good point.
practically. Then my other point would be, that elections and appointments by a board is still a political act, right? So it's not necessarily a person that's qualified to be on any position appointed by a selectman. It's a political act. It's a popularity contest as well as an election is as well. So there's those considerations.
I think as we expand this from 3 to 5, I think we can come up with language that could address the quorum as we move forward from 3 to 5.
because I wouldn't want it to be, let's say you have a 5-member board, you only have 3 currently, and it goes for, let's say, 6 months.
Yeah.
That you need exact unanimity.
I don't know how Mass General law reads, but I defer that to Warren, but I think if you have.
But I think-
If you have a 5-member board, but there's only 3, I don't believe you're not breaking the laws if you say you have 2 that voted you were back, because you only have 3 members on that committee. But I think that's what Mass General law is, but I think it's a good point. It's fair that we defer to. But what I'd like to do, so we can keep the process moving, since we have a quorum this evening, if anyone would like to suggest a motion that we change the Board of Health from 3 to 5, I'd entertain a motion and we could vote. And we're not voting on the charter, we're voting just on that piece for the minutes. We want to.
I'll make a motion.
Hang on a second, but this is a bylaw change, correct? So this is not a charter change?
This is in the charter, I believe.
It's in the charter.
It's in the charter. If not, if there's a
And we
question,
discussed
we
it
won't.
at great length.
Yeah.
What you're saying is.
It's a five.
Wow,
Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I understand, it's a dilemma of the 3 to 5, I understand all that. Again, the history to this is this, the appointed versus elected issue really came down to the fact that there were some very good people, I knew some of these people, who served, but didn't have the backgrounds that would lend to the business that they had to undertake. So it would occasionally be a problem. So when the Charter Commission back then decided to go with having appointed, that was the major reason. If you want to go to 5, that's again your choice, okay? You can make the case. I haven't got a problem with numbers. And there's some flexibility to having 5 because you can run that board. If you only have 3 people show up, you can still be efficient. This is only 5. If you're not held, they're not doing business. That's the plus.
I understand, yeah, and that's why this, and that's why we were discussing this initially.
No, I understand that.
Dennis had kind of filled us in on the history, and he brought that point up years ago when that had happened, that there were folks that really weren't qualified that were elected that couldn't really do the job. So that's why, yeah, he had mentioned that to us.
I served on the Board of Health 4 years. It's been a while, 20 years ago. I'm a clinical social worker by background. I've done the mental health field. I worked in both community and institutional based, hospital based. So yeah, I'm not a healthcare worker in the sense of public health worker, no. However, mental health background, yeah. That's why I just, in other words, hospital stuff, and we have medical stuff. So it's very easy for a person with that kind of background, if you like, to adapt. The bigger concern with 5, and people have raised it, and it's true, is getting people who are qualified. The advantage of 5 would be this: if I was in a position to have to consider somebody for this board, and I had 4 members of this board who were strong public health backgrounds of various types, but understand what they're doing, then the 5th person does not have to be as strong, but show motivation and a willingness to learn. That's an advantage, if you like, to having 5.
We have that on the Conservation Commission, so we have very strong candidates who've been, and they'll bring somebody on that has 0 background, but they need to bring, because they need to, who knows, they'll return, right? Sure. They need to educate, as you know, one of the Conservation Commission members said to me, it took me a good 6 solid years to get to where, you know, to really understand the depths of this role. And he knew nothing about it, but he said, hey, I'll do it. And it took a long time. It does take a while. So it's nice to have it, someone, as I say, someone on the bench kind of learning. So in the eventually they have to make those key decisions. They're educated.
That's the other thing too. In some cases, you know, you have members that say, hey, you know, everybody really should be, because Title V and how do I say it, septic stuff is a big part of our jobs. With plans, like Mr. Colmine brought up, with plan review, you need a signature. Sometimes it's an emergency. And it's either money on the line, contract's not getting paid, system's not gonna get installed, people are pumping a tank because they can't use the field. You know, that gets extremely costly, drives the loan program right out of the site. In the meantime, it's inconvenient to people. You can't flush the toilet, you can't take a shower, because a tank will fill up in 4 days if there's a reasonable sized family, not one person.
Right.
You know, 3 people will fill that tank in 4 days.
Thank you, Mr. Much.
Oh, you're all set?
So-
Okay, well, thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it.
I'm echoing what Guy said, is that there were board members that were elected years ago, and they made laws that were like, for no good reason, like well laws, 200 feet instead of 100 feet. The entire state of Massachusetts, 100 feet. You know, someone comes in and said, I need to get a permit, but I'm looking at the Bellingham regulation, it says I can't have a permit because I can't get my well on my property 200 feet away, because it's a small lot. And I'm going like, it's not 200 feet, it's 100 feet. Well, lo and behold, someone 10 years before I got on the board passed this thing. I said, next meeting, go on. You know, in the meantime, I said, issue them a permit. We're not gonna have a law that, there was no science based on it, you know. I'm a science person, and I said, I know a lot about groundwater, I know a lot about septic and stuff. I said, there is no way that well, you know, 100 feet away is not absolute perfect protection. So,
I think, are there any other questions or
Do you have a
comments?
motion?
I just want to make sure before we I asked him if we want to do a motion, so anybody, Larry, you'd raise your hand, you want to make a motion?
I have one written up with the language if you want me to do it with the section so that we have it in here. So motion to change section 8-2-3 of the charter in regards to the Board of Health, moving from 3 members to 5 members, each appointed for a term of 3 years.
We have a first, we have a second.
Did you make it?
Yes, you made it first, we have a second by Larry. Any?
Just one quick discussion point.
Yeah, sure. Look, no,
I'm not against that at all. I'll vote for it. I just would like to have town council look into the quorum point that I raised. And maybe perhaps that we look into that if we need to address that at all.
Okay.
Do we need to add in that they can't all end at the same time, or is that just gonna be automatic?
I think we
You
address
can't have
that
all
through
those
language.
terms,
Yeah, we want to add that in.
because I know that there's terms in for some of these.
They don't-
Yeah, I mean, in
No, they can't do it.
in our
Yeah.
charter, there's no terms listed. That doesn't say that we can't
Okay.
I think that would come with
do it.
With
the town council.
The town council, when it's in the
Okay.
warrant for town meeting, we'll have that written, but I think that's important to add to the minutes, to make sure it's not missed. The town
You
council.
could have 2 members.
A staggered
Yeah,
term.
A 2-2-1, like.
Two,
Of
two,
this
one.
year, like equal number of members as possible shall expire each year.
You have to be 2-2-1.
2-2-1, exactly.
And it's equal number as possible, but sometimes.
It doesn't work out, you're right. Yes. Okay.
Where?
Let's-
No, I think we wait for the,
I think, do we
Yeah,
want
number
to,
five.
do we want to wait, do we want to pause the motion until we defer to town council and get it right, or do we want to, the 3 to 5 we can do, and then we can always.
I don't know if
Wait.
I'd want to do the 3 to 5 without the language,
Let's just wait.
because
we can wait.
I'll make a
to
motion.
Brian's point, if we go from 3 to 5 and then there ends up being a quorum issue in the meantime, I'd rather do it all at once.
Good point.
Yeah.
Just make that we want to, we'll vote on it. Yes, Mr. Fluette, please, help us out here.
I'm not sure I'm following what the quorum issue is with 5 members. I'm missing something.
So let me explain. I think what I heard is if there's the committees of 5.
Yeah.
But we only have 3 because we can't find 2. Does that mean that when there's a meeting of 3, there's a quorum because of 5, but does the vote have to be unanimous in order for whatever they're doing?
No.
And
Yes,
that's for the
Take the
board.
board of selectmen, any 5 member duly appointed board or
I think so.
elected board.
Right,
It takes 3 to have a quorum
right,
to run a meeting.
right.
There's 5 members to that group. The decisions made by the 3 are strong as if it was 5.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's what
and typically,
Mass general law is very clear.
it's very clear, there's no ifs or buts, do not create any new language, I don't think you need to. And it applies to all boards, not just the Board of Health.
Right, right.
Everybody operates by the same.
So, if, as an example, the select board has a meeting, there's 5, there's only 3 to quorum, the two say yay, nay, motion's gonna pass.
Right, but let's say you had.
So
5.
John, my only point is that, for example, the planning board, a special permit requires a 4 out of 5. So if there's only 4, it has to be a unanimous decision. So it's the unanimity, and there may not be any decisions that require a certain number of votes for the Board of Health. I don't know, but I think it's worth looking into before we certainly don't want to leap before we look.
I think we need language.
We'll ask
For
Lauren.
the process of going.
I think it's fair, I agree with you.
But I believe there is a provision in Mass General Law for that, but we'll confirm
I
it.
do, but
Yeah, I was thinking that there would be more of an issue if we went from 3 to 5, but then we're delayed in finding those
Correct.
4th and
Right.
5th members,
That is
and
a
only 2
membership
people
has
can
to
come,
vote.
and then you can't even have a
Yes,
meeting.
right.
So that's more my
I think
concern.
there is some language in Mass General Law, so that's why we need to check it.
let's just check with
Lauren.
Lauren. Fair enough. Okay, I think we beat this one. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
your time.
Thank you.
So you're gonna get 5 members. We'll just figure out how and when.
Eventually.
I and the other members will show up, so we can all review them together.
Thank you, Vinnie, for
Thank
coming.
you very much. So the next item on our agenda was to present the latest version of Red Line. As you heard Lauren she didn't complete it as we had requested. So what I've asked her to do is to turn that around as soon as possible. Once I get a copy, I will forward it to all of you for your review. And then we'll meet again and we'll go through those items. If there's some things that we want to address, we'll address them. If not, what I'd like to do is as we go through those items, it'll be on the website too, you folks. And if any of you folks want a copy once we have it, you can email myself or you can email any of the members or Larry, Beth, and we'll get you a copy and happy to have a conversation as well about anything that concerns you. And when we have the next meeting, if your folks are going to join us, if there are things that concern you, if you want to talk to us first, we'll make sure that that is listed on the agenda. But that's what we'll do. We'll get that to you so that we can go. What I'd like to do is to kind of go through the red line again and go down through the items. And if we're okay with the item, I just want to just check them off, not vote on them, but just check them off so we can say we don't keep going back and going back because we'll never get this done. If we're okay with it, and again, we're making the recommendation to town meeting. Town meeting still is the authority that's going to say yay or nay. So my point is, let's get through it all, and if there's one or two items that are remaining, we can beat it up, or somebody can make a motion on this committee to approve it. If it goes to town meeting, it can still get beaten up. I mean, that's just the way the process works. So I will get that to you as soon as I have it. And now all we really need is come up with a date for in August. So well, the other thing too, I'm sorry, yeah, I have a note here. The minutes, did everyone have a chance to review all of the previous minutes? I know that I was away and Kelly said she had some comments from the minutes.
I only sent out the ones that I did the last meeting that I asked for edits, and that's what I attached to the email.
Thank you.
I didn't feel that we had sort of rounded back
I
to the
don't think we
conversation
have.
about
Okay, fair enough.
the previous minutes.
So
Um,
I will ask.
I think
work
that's
Beth
a
to get
job.
copies of all those minutes that we have, that maybe Melissa can pull them all together for us possibly.
Yeah, I thought we had pulled all those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we did too, so.
Yeah, we did.
But I think we were trying to figure out how we go about approving them and releasing them, and we have to figure out who can vote on which minutes, because if you weren't there, then you can't vote on those.
Right.
It's
I have a philosophical problem. Voting on minutes 2 years after the fact.
so this is what I had asked, what do we do?
I think we reach out to Lauren, get her opinion. Maybe have her reach out to the Ethics Commission to find out if we've done any violations.
I will do that. 'cause I
This
agree.
board has spent too much time on this to make a clerical error. I'm not saying voting could be an error. But to find out in October, our minutes were incorrect, we didn't do something properly, or I think we need to get advice on how to deal with minutes 2 years after some of the meetings.
I agree. I absolutely agree
I
with you.
I don't
I
have
will do
any
that.
objection to that.
I will do that because I think it's
Better to
important.
give it out.
Well, I'm also concerned there's no 2023 minutes on the website.
Because we haven't voted on them yet, so that's
But the
why,
2022 are on there.
and that was
21
someone else
on there
put
too.
them up there.
Exactly,
So,
so I'm just, that's where I'm stuck. Because.
and not all of them are up there, like some were voted, so they're up there, some are, and that's why we need to talk to Lauren, because I think we need, to your point, I think we need to go through everything, get copies of everything and vote on everything.
So I
And
pulled
then
the
get
the website and I tried to read them all and I'm missing on some of them. And I know I was there. And then I was trying to find a calendar to match up the minutes to the date of the minutes and see what was missing, what was I missing? And I'm missing on most of them. And I know I only missed one. One thing I know for sure I wasn't there, but my name's not there. So I'm concerned whether I can vote on them or not, because I'm not there.
I do know there were multiple people who missed a lot of meetings. I have
And
all
ironically, her name is
the
on.
emails,
Hmm?
what?
Her name is on most of those.
So that's why I'm struggling. So, you know, I feel uncomfortable doing that.
And I appreciate that, and I understand, that's why we need to get it right, so we'll talk to Lauren. So, you know, based on the type of committee, I don't know, I'll just find out what the law is regarding
We
the
need
charter. Yeah, I agree. You know, I don't wanna, like I said in my email, I don't wanna vote on anything tonight.
Mhm.
I just need to, this is a discussion, because we need to level set moving forward, so we can get it done, do it right, dot the i's, cross the t's.
I was hoping to put this to bed tonight just because it's been a big package over our heads. I was really kind of hoping that we could move through this, but I found those two challenges.
I want to make sure,
No, I appreciate that.
and I want to make sure we haven't violated anything.
But the more I start looking, I'm like, well, I'm not on that meeting, I'm not on this meeting, I can't compare,
Yes,
what am I missing?
It's hard, Jenna. When I looked through all the minutes and I was looking at who was there, the whole bit, I saw that there were a number of times that you weren't there, and if you're saying you were there, you were there. I don't remember you being in, it's like, you're probably on Zoom, but again, I'm not saying anything critical or not throwing it in the bus, it's just, you're right, what we have for record, if you're saying you're there, then we have to take your word for it, and you were there. I just, when you look through the minutes, I don't see a lot of commentary, or whatever, so I don't know, and you see Joyce, and I've said this publicly, I mean, I've reached out to her, she's not responded to me once. She's on there, and I'm like, she was never at a meeting, she might have been at
No,
one meeting, and
That's
she's.
what I'm struggling, and was I mistaken for her, you know,
Could be.
I
could very
know,
well
like
be.
I said, I know I couldn't make on.
And it was compounded by a lot of people zooming during COVID.
Yeah,
That was an option that we
it was
utilized.
an option, and the other thing too, we talked about this, the meeting in January, you know, Dennis at that point was taking all the minutes.
Mhm.
And we have scoured his office, Beth has, I am, we all have, we cannot find, and we know that we had a meeting and we don't have minutes. So that might be a situation where I've got to talk to Lauren about that as well. We know that's the case, and we talked about it at the last meeting.
Mhm.
There's nothing, no one's trying to do anything wrong. We literally scoured looking for the minutes. We don't know. We might have had it in a notebook somewhere. I don't know.
Mhm.
And Beth has looked, Melissa's looked, we've all looked. So here we are. So we can't do that.
Chairman, can I make a suggestion to you real quick on the, did you record all the meetings? The 2 years worth, were they on Zoom? Did you record them?
I'm not, I had to check with whoever.
Because I'm just reading the open meeting stuff under the section, and you can use recordings to go back to those and find out who was there and who was not. I mean, it's gonna take somebody some time to do it, but I mean, they can go back, because you can use the recordings to go back and make the notes.
I'm not sure if we recorded the Zooms at all, because we didn't do like ABMI, like that stuff, but I can easily go back and look, and that's a good idea, go back and look and.
Get as many of them as you can, because that under, it says it right here, documents and other exhibits such as photographs, recordings, or maps used by the body at the open executive session shall, along with the minutes, be part of the official record.
They are. Absolutely, they are.
Oh. If you have it, it might help you.
The thing is, we did a lot of the meetings when this room was kind of torn apart.
Right.
It was. I know.
Can I ask a question as well?
Sure.
I don't know how Dennis, if he's a computer guy, but maybe the minutes, maybe you thought of this, is on his computer, or maybe they're somewhere in his emails where we
He
can draw
was
from.
a yellow legal pad note taker, and that was
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
And I've also had access.
And we've had access to the computer, so I'll look through the,
Mr. Poulet?
Yeah, just a recommendation, suggestion, if you'd like to the board, given you're discussing attendance, okay, at meetings? Okay. Couple things as a practice, only is because I think it's more efficient and helpful, and it would help any committee stay on track. One is you review the minutes at the next meeting you have, if at all possible. Sometimes they're not ready, but
Agreed.
depends how far apart your meetings may be and things like that. Exceptions can occur, but the second thing is it's a requirement to take attendance at all meetings. So that should be caught at the top of the list of the minutes, who attended, you know. You don't have to necessarily put who did not attend, of the 9 or
Who
whatever.
attended?
But who attended, because that's your quorum. And your official business, that's the only reason, okay? I hope that
No,
helps.
and we did that. We didn't like poll, but
Oh.
Dennis did write in the minutes who attended in attendance.
Okay.
It's on all of the minutes. The question we have is that Mrs. Altamonte saying, I was at more than the meetings. When I review the minutes, my name's not listed. So, and I understand your concern. And there's another individual that we know for a fact that was at the first one and never at anything else.
Yeah.
And her name seems to appear in the minutes, but Dennis knows the individuals and he was doing the minutes. At first it was Mr. Cuthbert. And then, Dennis was doing them and Larry was doing them.
You're doing Zoom also, which makes it a
Yes,
little
makes
more.
it challenging.
Yeah.
But you know, the other thing with Zoom that bothers me is that I know Joe's here, I see him, but a lot of times people like, they turn their cameras up, they could be in the kitchen,
I
you know?
It's not as efficient.
It's not.
I mean, you can get stuff done, but it's not.
Yeah, I agree. All right,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, so any other old business to discuss? We have minutes, we have a plan moving forward. Any new business? Anything new?
I
Um,
would think the next meeting date we need to.
Yeah, let's get that nailed down.
you wanna-
Again. Beth?
Do you want to do 2 weeks?
I like, can I suggest something? We heard tonight from town council on Dan's, Dan's met with some of us individually.
What's that?
Dan has met with some of us individually
Mhm.
with this language. I would think we may have 2 meetings in August. The first could be in 2 weeks on Wednesday, August 3rd. And ask him to just articulate the reasoning behind his language.
2 weeks and 26.
So I will let you know that
I'd like to do third, I can't.
Thursday.
so would,
Wednesday.
someone else would need to take the minutes. I am not in town that day, so
So we're
that
gonna stick
week.
with Wednesdays because we have this room that's available. So we talked about that in the very beginning. We need to stick with Wednesdays because of availability of the room. So it'll be Wednesday. So I don't have a calendar in front of me. So what is the first Wednesday in August?
Second.
So it's
First
either
Wednesday in August is the
Wednesday,
second.
Or 8/9. So we'll either do 8/2 or 8/9. Mrs. Grant, are you here 8/9?
Mr. Chair,
Oh, hold on, Joe. I'll be right with you. Thank you.
I am here 8-9, and I could give an hour, but that is also the day before Bellingham Day, so I will
Oh,
need to
that's
be
right.
at the middle school figuring out.
Mr. and Eric would be, like tonight.
All right, so,
I would say the second, but you can't be here, correct?
I'll be in California, so no, I will not be here. Sorry, sorry, I'm not zooming into any meetings on my one vacation we've had in 5 years.
I can't do the 16th, that's my anniversary.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir, your turn.
I am not available on the 2nd of August. I'm having a pacemaker put in.
So that's, yeah, so I would say we've got.
So we're not gonna have.
You can still zoom in.
It'll be 8/9.
That's what it is.
It'll be, you said 8/9 me for a bit.
Yeah, I can make myself available at least from 6 to 7.
Okay, we can start earlier.
Again, one of the reasons I wanted the second was to hear from Mr. Ranieri. He can't be here.
We've heard from Mr. Ranieri.
No, we haven't.
All right, first of all, all due respect to Mr. Ranieri, this is not about Mr. Ranieri.
I'm not saying it is.
And I'm not gonna change a meeting for the committee. And we tried to do it this week and we couldn't. I'm not going to, he's given us his comments. I'm sure he's gonna get, if he wants a copy of what Lauren's responses were, we'll provide him a copy of those responses. If he wants to write it up and meet with us individually, we can. We need to move forward.
I understand that, but we just heard from one side, from a legal person. Well, let him say what, that she gave us her opinion on what she wrote.
Can I make a comment? But his opinion was what was sent to the attorney in the first place, so he already stated his opinion multiple times.
Exactly.
We had our town attorney address all of his concerns, which we didn't give that to any other citizen who's showed up to any of the meetings.
No, the citizens have sent 4 pages of comments.
But
No,
it's been addressed.
again, okay.
I mean, there really wasn't much disagreement with anything he wrote, other than it's.
What she basically said is, the intent was the same, he just worded it differently. And in her legal opinion, the way that we had worded things is consistent with Mass General Law. So there's nothing that he's put in there that's really any materially different, and that's what we look at. But I'm not gonna.
Okay, then can I propose this?
Let's
We need
get
to
him
know-
here. Let's get him here.
So yeah, exactly. So why can't you do, why do you have to, why can't you do it on the 23rd? I mean, he's taking the time to meet with people.
First of all, I'm gonna be taking my daughter to college that week, so no.
So, but pick another date. There's not just this room that's.
Why isn't he here now?
Yeah, why is he?
That's too bad.
Ken,
Can we do the 9th and the 16th? We address the minutes on the 9th? I'm sorry?
She's on her
Anniversary.
she's on her anniversary.
It's when I pay to Kelly, you only have an hour.
On the 9th,
It's not fair to have an hour.
I can do the minutes.
so we'll do the minute.
I'll do the minutes on the 9th. That way you don't have to worry about it. You can be here for the hour and then you can fly.
And I'll just say this, Kelly has cut a big, big job for Bellingham Days. And that, I mean, that's a huge event, a lot of money's being spent, she puts in a tremendous amount of time. And I want to do what we can to support the effort, because the whole town comes out for this, it's a wonderful, wonderful event. And there's no way that I want to, take Kelly's time away, if she can't be here, and you don't feel like you have to be here. I know you want to be here.
I can make sure that I've got that from
Okay.
6 to 7.
You want to move it to 5?
Sorry.
Does 5 make it easier? You
I can zoom in, I can do. Come from Connecticut.
Okay.
I think
That's
6 is fine, 6 is fine.
All right, so we're gonna have our next meeting on 8/9. And ideally, we are gonna be able to have a response from Lauren on the minutes. And also, hopefully, by the end of this week, have an updated charter with an appropriate red line to send to everybody to review. So on 8/9, if we can get through the minutes, we will. And on 8/9, if we have an opportunity to go through the charter and kind of tick off sections that we're okay with, leaving ones that there's still some discussion to be had, we'll have discussion. And then from 8/9, we'll then decide what the next meeting will be, so that we can make sure that things change. Let's do 8/9 for now. And if it's 8/16 the following week, we'll figure out what we can do on 8/16.
One more thing you need from Lauren,
What's that?
the language on the,
Yeah, we have.
Yes, the Board of Health.
I just want to make sure you got that.
Yeah, we did.
We also put to vote for this last month and this month's minutes.
Yeah, so we'll have minutes from the last meeting
And this
ready,
meeting.
and this meeting ready
Yep.
for the next meeting. So we can go
I do have a
on.
question on the last meeting minutes. If you amended them, do I have a copy of the amended minutes?
You
Or
got
they're amended?
you got it in your email, so along with the agenda, so you got the final minutes, and then the first version of the minutes were actually sent the same night of the meeting. I sat here and
I
finished
had
them and
that.
sent them out. Yep.
I had that.
And then they're attached with the email that also has the agenda. There were 2 attachments that
I
was
did print
sent
them out,
on
I couldn't tell you the thing.
Sunday. So there were only 2 minor changes. Joe made an edit. Mr. O'Connell made an edit. And those are the only 2 people who reviewed and offered edits. So those are what I changed. They're edits, otherwise it's all confirmed with the YouTube video.
Can I make one
Yep,
point
go ahead,
or
Brian.
suggestion about the next meeting? To the extent that there were, I don't want to call them allegations, but to the extent that there were comments made at town meeting that our meetings were somehow clandestine and intentionally held under the radar, or not giving people an opportunity to speak. For the good of the process, is it wise to deny the person advocating or the person suggesting perhaps that the process was flawed, to deny him an opportunity to attend a meeting for the good of insulating the process?
So Brian, I understand what you're saying, and I think what we talked about was We have some things we need to do on 8-9. Mr. Renier, he'll have plenty of time. And I would suggest that we move forward 8-9 to get some of the things we need to get done and still invite Mr. Ranieri back before we make any final recommendations or any final vote on the charter to be submitted. So I agree. If you can't make it the 9th, I don't want to slow the process down because then we're going to rush at the end and then we're going to be accused of rushing. I don't want to rush. Let's tick off what we can tick off on the 9th, right? And then we can invite Mr. Ranieri back to have that conversation with us, because I also want him to have an opportunity to review the analysis provided by town council. I think that's fair too. So we'll do that. I just don't think we should stop the process when we can kind of, in parallel, get some things knocked off what we need to get knocked off. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying no to Mr. Ranieri. I'm just not going to say no to a meeting on the 9th because he can't be here.
Yeah, I can't be here either, so, but I don't think it matters. Mr. Ranieri carries no more weight than I do in this town from that perspective, so I don't think you hold a meeting up for a resident. Right, you guys do what you need to do. I chose to attend tonight because I made time for it, right? I skipped my son's soccer game to be here for that.
Yeah.
So if Mr. Ranieri needs to be here, then he can be here.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, any more comments from the committee?
I have one question.
Sure.
Picking up on what the woman in the back said earlier. Do we have a drop-down box for this committee?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a box. that we
Under
go-
committee, yep, it's been there
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And that's where you can find all the minutes.
Yep.
All that, it's all there.
Okay, I just tend to look at the hard copies.
All there. Yeah, all the,
There was a drop-
And the red line charter that was presented at town meeting is there along with the bylaws that were already approved. So those are both on there.
seeing that we have fulfilled our agenda, I move for a motion.
I'll make a motion to close.
We have a first, we have a second. Are there any further discussion there? None, seeing none, I call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, the meeting closed at 8:02 PM.